Hello everyone, my name is Yesenia Rodriguez and I will be presenting my policy recommendation for undergraduate seminar at Florida International University. My policy recommendation is a reform of mandatory minimum sentencing. Across nations, disparities in the procedures employed for deciding and sentencing individuals accused of criminal activities are not only observable, but they underscore the complexity of the legal landscape. While the legal system is designed to deliver swift and equitable justice, the speedy adjudication and sentencing inadvertently causes many inadequacies. Because of the increased crimes during the 1970s, Congress passed a Sentencing Reform Act. It is important to note that this reform weakened judges' authority to sentence for certain offenses such as crime and drugs. Intentions of mandatory minimum sentencing have three key points: improve resource allocation, reduce repeat offenses, and reduce incarceration. The purpose behind implementing mandatory minimum sentencing was to enhance efficiencies and optimize resource allocation processes within the criminal justice system. The goal is to decrease repeat offenses and lower incarceration rates. However, it is evident that not only do the intentions require reform and reassessment, but there is also a need for additional sentencing guidelines and training for all professionals in the field. The effects of mandatory minimum sentencing seem to favor offenders who are inclined to commit future offenses and further penalize those who are not likely to reoffend. The inefficiency in the allocation of resources was evident in the journal effect of mandatory minimum punishments on the efficiency of criminal justice resource allocation, where judges struggle to identify offenders' risk levels. Further discussing these effects are prosecutors. They may feel compelled to pursue charges that carry mandatory minimum sentencing, even in the cases where they believe a more nuanced or lenient approach may be appropriate. This can result in a loss of flexibility for prosecutors to consider individual circumstances, potentially leading to less just outcomes. For offenders and family, mandatory minimum sentencing removes the discretion of judges to consider the unique circumstances of each case and apply a sentence that fits the specific details. This lack of flexibility can result in individuals receiving sentences that may be perceived as disproportionately severe, especially when factors like intent, remorse, or external influences are not taken into account. The families of those facing mandatory minimum sentences often experience emotional distress and financial strain. Lengthy and inflexible sentences can disrupt family dynamics, placing a strain on relationships and making it challenging for family members to cope with the absence of their loved ones. For judges, mandatory minimum sentences diminishes the discretionary power of judges in determining appropriate sentences based on the unique circumstance of each case. This can be frustrating for judges who may feel compelled to impose predetermined sentences, limiting their ability to tailor punishment to specific facts and context of the individual case. For other prisoners, the increased population within prisons can intensify such issues as violence, limited access to educational and vocational programs, and the difficulties in providing adequate health care. It may also contribute to the degradation of the overall rehabilitative environment within the prison system, as resources are stretched thin, making it challenging to address the diverse needs of the inmates population. Next, let's talk about racial disparities. One main point regarding the effects of mandatory minimum sentencing is the aggravation of racial disparities within the criminal justice system. Mandatory minimum sentencing have been criticized for contributing to the disproportionate incarceration of minority population, particularly Black and Hispanic individuals. And last but not least, one main point regarding the effects of mandatory minimum sentencing in our society and tax dollars is the substantial financial burden imposed by those incarcerations of individuals. Mandatory minimum sentencing, particularly for nonviolent offenses, result in longer prison terms and increased costs associated with housing, feeding, providing medical care for the inmates. The extended period of incarceration strains the resources of the criminal justice system, leading to higher overall expenditures and tax dollars that could be allocated to other societal needs such as education, healthcare, or infrastructure end up being diverted to fund the maintenance of a larger prison population. In the inefficiency in the allocation of criminal justice resources, there are three key points: risk levels, biases, and judges who have a reputation for being liberal versus judges who have a reputation for being conservative. The effects of mandatory minimum sentencing seem to favor offenders who are inclined to commit future offenses and further penalize those who are not likely to reoffend. This inefficiency in the allocation of resources was evident in the journal Effect of Mandatory Minimum Punishments on the Efficiency of Criminal Justice Resource Allocation, where judges struggle to identify offenders' risk levels. Situations may result in the release of higher risk individuals and the incarceration of lower risk individuals. As noted earlier, the biases presented in judges' decision making contribute to sentencing inefficiency, disproportionately affecting minorities and influencing the judges' reputations in electronic monitoring cases. Some judges are characterized as liberal, intensively employing electronic monitoring in their sentencing practices, while others, considered conservative, refrain from utilizing electronic monitoring altogether. Two key points for effects of mandatory minimum sentencing is the reliance of imprisonment and the overcrowding jails. One significant effect of mandatory minimum sentencing on other prisoners is the potential for the overcrowded prison system. When individuals receive mandatory minimum sentencing, particularly for nonviolent offenses, it can lead to an influx of inmates serving lengthy sentencing. The overcrowding places a strain on the entire prison infrastructure, affecting the living condition, resources, and rehabilitation programs available to all prisoners. As seen on the two images, these are inhumane conditions for prisoners. While in the United States, we have resources to have cleaner cells, as seen in the first image. But other countries like Argentina, from the journal Criminal Recidivism After Prison and Electronic Monitoring, these cells are not clean or equipped to sustain the increase of prisoners as seen on the image on the bottom. Some of the inmates are sleeping on the floor. The initiation of reform in mandatory minimum sentencing starts with comprehensive training and education for all criminal justice professionals. Through this approach, biases can be reduced by standardizing policies and establishing criteria based on the nature of the crime, the offender's risk, and distinguishing between first-time offenders or repeated offenses. Additionally, incorporating an assessment of the offender's remorsefulness adds a personalized dimension to the process. This unification extends beyond state and federal levels to a national scale, fostering a shared understanding that offenses will yield consistent consequences nationwide. Such a unified system holds judges and parole boards accountable for any potential injustices in their decision. It is crucial to recognize that in the United States, each state has their own set of laws and potentially hindering uniformity. Therefore, a closer examination of these laws is necessary for a comprehensive evaluation. The implementation of reforming mandatory minimum sentencing will entail an increase in reevaluation of public health services, nutrition, substance abuse, mental health, housing, among others. By reforming mandatory minimum sentencing and adding public health services, these can decrease overcrowding jails, reduce recidivism, while also eliminating the negative effect of offenders' records, which leads to disrupt employment and lead to the loss of social benefits, making it more challenging for individuals to reintegrate into society. It is important to note that additional funds or the reallocation of funds in investing in the expansion of jail facilities can be used for these services, while also helping the economy with reducing unemployment by employing professionals for programs such as mental health and substance abuse. To add, as individuals integrate into society, the assistance of other federal funding programs like SNAP, cash assistance, and in some cases housing and medical health insurance will likely to increase. Also, there are challenges such as waitlists, delays, and inefficient financial resources must be tackled to ensure the effectiveness of public health initiatives. An objective to the reform is transparency and public awareness. By doing so, the public begins to understand and support, they understand the challenges and begin to participate. Extending this transparency and sentences in the judicial system to the public becomes equally imperative. By fostering a deeper understanding among citizens regarding the consequences and challenges associated with mandatory minimum sentences, awareness is heightened. This increased awareness not only prompts public support for reforms, but also encourages active participation in advocating for more equitable and effective criminal justice system. A well-informed public becomes a medium for positive change, offering valuable assistance in the ongoing efforts to address the complexities within the legal landscape. To conclude, this comprehensive policy recommendation aims to address the complexities within the legal landscape, advocating for reform, transparency, and public engagement to achieve a more balanced and effective justice system for all. The following slide contains the cited images. I thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this useful.